the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Mr. Whitten, the illustrated edition of Treasure Island by the great Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson, and a £1/4 bag of mint imperials. I can't remember much about my first church. And I don't mean the first church I was pastor of. My mind isn't that far gone yet. I mean the first church I belonged to, the church in which I and my sister was baptized and spent the first 10 years of my life. I can't remember much about it. I can't remember how many seats it had, how many folks it held. I can't remember if it had a great pipe organ or not, or even if it was a pipe organ. But for all I know, the little old lady that was the organist could have been pedaling away on those bellow pedals, for all I know. Couldn't tell you, if you put a gun to my head, what color the stain on the pews were. But I remember Mr. Whitten. He was my Sunday school teacher. And he was my sister's Sunday school teacher. He was Sunday school teacher to generations of kids in that kirk. I can't even tell you what his first name was. To me, it was just Mr. Whitten. But he probably brought the gospel to life in the lives of more people than I have as a pastor. The generation after generation that passed through the Sunday school room of Mr. Whitten. I can't tell you all those things about the church that I just gave in a litany, but I can tell you that when I was a little rugrat, just a wee laddie, during the prize ceremony at the end of the Sunday school year, I was given an illustrated edition of Treasure Island. And when you opened it up, on the inside, it said, in one of those stickers, this book is awarded to Kenneth Charles Blyth for regular attendance at the Sunday School of St. Columba's Parish Church. You'll notice it wasn't for perfect attendance. In fact, after the first service, several people came up and said, in my Sunday school, you didn't get anything unless it was perfect attendance. Well, they were grading on the curve, so I got that book, and I still have it, I think. Michael and I lost a whole lot of books in the flood. Everything that was on the bottom shelf of my bookshelf, and a couple of second shelves where the water expanded the bookshelf and the second shelf fell into the first one. Yeah, Joyce, you know what I'm talking about. And truth be told, most of the books weren't very expensive. Don't tell the insurance company I said that, but it wasn't the cost. It was the emotional connection to a lot of those books and family Bibles. And I hope that Treasure Island wasn't one of the ones that was destroyed, because I still have it, I think. Either I have it in boxes in storage, or it's in a landfill now. But until Hurricane Helene, I had it. And I remember feeling so touched that church cared enough to count the number of times I was there, and then to reward me for being there with a good Scottish novel like Treasure Island. I just remember how touched I was, which is why I still have the book, I think. A £1/4 bag of mint imperials. Now, in Scotland, a mint imperial was a favorite candy. They're sort of, like if you take something round and squash it a little so it becomes narrower but still kind of round. I'm sure there's a mathematical term for that shape, but I don't know it. And everything shrinks. Have you noticed how candies and cookies are all much smaller than they used to be? I don't know what size a mint imperial is now in Scotland, but when I was a kid, they were huge. And this is the days when you'd go to the confectioner and you'd ask for, a £1/4. I didn't meet anyone that asked for a £1/2 of sweeties. It was always a £1/4, and they took the big jar off the shelf, opened the top, poured it onto the scales, weighed your £1/4, and the scales had a little container that was pointed at one end, and they'd pick that up and pour it into a paper bag and then twirl the paper bag, and that was it. And my granddad would go to the confectioner's on a Saturday to get a £1/4 of mint imperials to take to church on Sunday. In Dundee, where I grew up, our nickname for mint imperials were Granny Sookers, because so many grandmothers would go to church with them and suck the sweetie during the sermon. I mean, only during the sermon. One day, my grandfather opened his £1/4 bag of mint imperials and dropped them. We were in the balcony of the church, where the floors and the stairs were wood. A £1/4 bag of mint imperials bouncing from one step to the other made quite a racket. Worship stopped. I laughed hysterically. My mum chuckled. My dad looked angry at his dad, and my grandpa looked beet red. It probably only stoated down the stairs for 5 seconds. To me, it felt like 5 minutes, and to my granddad, it probably felt like 5 hours. Okay, I'm 6 minutes into the sermon. Why am I boring you with my boyhood memories of church? Because if you just change the names and the places, they're your stories too. I am quite sure that in every little vignette I just shared with you, into your mind and your heart popped an equivalent. The names may be changed to protect the innocent, as the old saying goes, but I'm sure you were playing right along with me. I'm sure you were saying, yeah, I can't remember the color of the carpet in my church. I can't remember this or that, but boy, I remember so-and-so. Or, boy, I remember that nativity play when my brother and I got in a fist fight or whatever, you know. Or that time my mother told me off for standing there in the middle of the nativity play with my finger up my nose, you know, whatever it was. I'm sure your grandparents probably didn't drop a £1/4 bag of Granny Sookers down the steps, but I'm sure you can close your eyes and remember what it was like to sit in church surrounded by those generations of saints. And I bet you would give anything, the whole world, to be sitting next to them one more time. Huh? You know, I told those stories because they're not just mine, they're yours. That church is gone now. I can't remember when it was demolished, but it was demolished. Now, as a little aside, it was demolished to build a nursing home. The Lord works in mysterious ways. My 98-year-old mother is now a resident of that nursing home. She now occupies a room about 70 feet above the spot where I and my sister were baptized more than a couple of years ago. And until the Alzheimer's got real bad with her, she would say where she was, Kenneth, you're not going to believe it. I'm in the facility where St. Columba's used to stand. There are so many impermanent things in life. Or, as a proofreading friend of mine would say, penultimate things. And they all point to the ultimate things. The color of the pews at St. Columba's don't matter. The number of seats it had. What matters is that that place and those people gathered together as church and passed the faith on to another generation. And that in that space that they had created and tended and filled and supplied, the old story of Jesus and his love was told again and again and again. The word was proclaimed, the sacraments were administered, the new saints were brought into a relationship with Jesus, and the old saints were sent to their eternal reward with dignity and joy and words of life. Because that's why they built that place. That's why they filled that place. That's why they tended and nurtured that place. Full of penultimate things to serve the ultimate thing. As you know, all of the pews here were destroyed because our flood water wasn't just clean water out of the faucet, wasn't even just salt water out of the bay. It was salt water mixed with sewage and yada, 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 yada. Broke my heart to see those pews going out of here and being broken up and put in a dumpster. I made a little list here just so I'd get names and things correct. Einar and Ruth Eck gave those pews. Those are names that don't mean much to most of us. I never had the honor of meeting the Ecks. They were gone to their eternal reward before I arrived. But at this worship service, as at the previous ones, I could see people smiling and nodding or nudging their loved one and saying, "Oh, you remember them? They were great." The wall behind me, that beautiful shell stone wall, given in blessed memory of Myron Roeder. Again, people that you knew and loved and are now gone. Things in church get repurposed. So until the floods, at either side of the door on this side, there were wooden platforms on which we put those brass offering holders. When I first arrived there, those stands were over on those sides, and there was a basket on top, and in the basket were the quarterly devotionals, Christ in Our Home. And if you look at the brass plaque that was on it, they've been in this building since the late 70s. So they've been used for all sorts of things. They were given in memory of Herman Arnold. There might be nobody here that remembers Mr. Arnold. And it broke my heart to see all of that going out of here. But I'll tell you what, that generation that I've just eulogized, they of all people knew the impermanence of life. That's a generation which we've called the greatest generation. They either lived through, or their parents lived through, the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. And if they didn't live through the Dust Bowl, they learned of it as contemporary history and not ancient American history. They knew what it was to have nothing. And they knew what it was to lose everything. And they served through a world war. And then a war in Korea. I remember 15, 20 years ago in a former congregation, I was poking fun at the Minnesotans. You know, I'm sorry, but you're an easy target, you know. You know, you're like the Scots. It's a target-rich environment. And I was talking about the Minnesotans, and I called them the frozen chosen. And after worship, one of the guys in the congregation came up to me and said, "Good joke," he says, "but I'll tell you, in Korea, I fought at the Chosin Reservoir. We were the frozen chosen." Those American soldiers who bled and died in that bleak winter in Korea. That's the generation. So when they gave gifts to the church, they knew it wasn't forever, because they knew what it was like to have everything and to lose everything. They knew exactly what it was like to have it one day and it to be gone the next. And they weren't the only generation. There are people in worship today, here at this service, and most certainly at the earlier service, who lost people way too young. Children and young adults, people just starting out on life. And they remember the smiles and the sound of laughter and what it felt like to hold a child that isn't here anymore. And although that is not the greatest generation, you know as well as I do, you know better than I do, that those kids and those young adults that we've loved and lost, they were great in their own way. Greatest generation or not, they were great to us. They gave, they built, They inhabited, they provided all the things that were necessary for the church, for the people of God to gather and hear the word proclaimed and taste and see the word in the sacraments. Whether it was a worship space as beautiful as this, and this is a beautiful space. I know we've got this East German look going right now, but this was a lovely space and will be again. I remember an old Scottish bishop that was famous for building new churches in his diocese, and he said, I don't care what kind of architecture you use, but every church should be an alleluia in stone. Oh, this is an alleluia in cement and laminated wood. This is an alleluia. But it serves the gospel that is proclaimed and lived out here. It's the same with an office. An office is either a place where you just shuffle paperwork, or it's a place where everyone in the community can call in and find a friendly voice and advice, and the records of the church can be maintained, and our outreach can happen. You know, a committee room is just a room set aside so that people of the church can gather and dream imaginatively and plan how they are going to spread and live out the gospel. And I know the old joke, the Lutheran Church is a series of meetings interrupted by worship. I know, I've heard that old joke before. But those meetings are important. And boy, I never thought we'd take restrooms for granted until this big building only had 2 working restrooms in the back 40, and each one is a one-shot deal. Suddenly, restrooms become much more important than they used to be, especially if you're a man of a certain age. All of this is important, but penultimate, to serve the gospel of Jesus Christ. So those names that I shared, and the dozens of others whose names are now known only to God, or wherever those records are kept now, in whichever landfill they now occupy, I know one thing of them, that if they were here today, seeing those pews gone, the altar and pulpit contaminated and not here for much long, they see the building half destroyed, the dumpsters strewn everywhere, I know what they do, because they did it before. And they're the kind of people that would do it again. They'd say, wow, I really thought that would last longer. You know the way we all say to each other, boy, I really thought growing old would take longer than this. Yeah. They would say, boy, I really thought that would have lasted longer. But, okay, we start again. Okay, we're the people who have a God that says, a crucified God that says, behold, I make everything new. Okay, put me in, coach. We're going to make everything new again. They're the people who would not have skipped a beat to move into the future. People that would not have cried over spilt milk, but would have just dreamed of what future God was calling them into, because they are the saints who before us have found their reward. They are all the saints who from their labors rest. And they're joined now by brand new saints. And this is awesome, because I can't make this up, because there's a brand new saint on the left-hand side of the church, and at the earlier service, right where Tom's sitting now, there was a brand new saint then. And those brand new saints will probably forget that there was ever a strange Scottish guy as pastor here. They'll probably never remember what color the carpet was, or whether we had chairs or pews. They won't remember the capacity of the parking lot. They're just going to remember that in this place that they called home, either briefly or forever, the gospel of Jesus Christ was faithfully proclaimed, and more faithfully yet lived out. They'll know that this place they called home welcomed them and loved them, And every Sunday there was an opportunity to again enter into, as I said before, the old story of Jesus and his love. And they'll have been taught to discern the difference between the penultimate and the ultimate. And maybe they'll remember a bit of us. And on an All Saints' Day, a long time from now, they'll sing their heart out and proclaim love for all the saints who from their labors rest. Amen.